Hi, this is Debbie and I'm delighted to join you today at Hero Arts. I'm going to be Copic colouring this cute as can be little hedgehog from Playful Animals, and I'm going to combine that with a couple of the new Leah Griffiths sets, Friends and Wood Grain. I'm starting out by using the Misty stamping tool and placing the hedgehog on a piece of Nina Solar White held in place on the Misty with the strong magnets. Then when you close the door of the Misty, the stamp is picked up onto the door and acts like a big acrylic block. I'm going to be using Memento Tuxedo Black as that's a good Copic friendly ink, and stamping that down onto the Nina Solar White. If you don't get a perfect impression first time, you can open up the door, re-ink and then stamp again. I like my outlines to be really black so I can keep re-stamping until I've got a really nice dark black outline to Copic colour. However, before I do any colouring, I like to die cut first, and then if I mess up the die cutting, I haven't spent ages colouring something only to have it messed up. I'm using the tag and label die from Hero Arts and running that through my Big Shot to die cut. I've chosen a range of Copics to colour with. I usually keep them in a big mug on my desk so that they're nice and handy. However, I will place each of the lids at the top of the screen so you can see which colours I'm using. I use the simple Copic colouring technique of using the lightest shade to get a base down first, and then working in some of the medium and darker shades, adding shadows, and then finally working my way back through to the lightest colour, again blending as I go. I've sped up this video so that I can get as much of the colouring in as possible. I'll play some music and I'll be back soon. Watching that back, this little guy ended up upside down half the time, but I find that that is helpful when you're trying to get the direction of your Copic colour strokes to turn the paper rather than trying to turn your hand. Having created a nice rich blend from the deepest browns at the bottom of the hedgehog up towards the lighter browns on the forehead, I now want to create some detail for the spines. If you look at a picture of a hedgehog, the spines are often lighter in colour, and I'm going to be using 3 pens to create lots of interest for the spines. Firstly, I'm using the Copic Zero Blender marker. This marker pushes colour away from where you apply it. So I'm tapping a little dot of the marker and then I'm swiping to the right in the direction of a spine and hopefully giving that impression of the lighter spine on the darker hedgehog. I keep going back and repeating the areas that I've already done, as over time the Zero Blender marker does blend in with the colours that are already down and the effect fades a little. Secondly, I'm going in with a Sakura Jelly Roll glitter pen. That gives nice champagne glittery spines. And then finally I'm going in with a Signo Uniball white gel pen. It's often difficult to capture the detail of a card on a photograph, particularly where there's glitter involved. However, if I turn this backwards and forwards to the light, hopefully you can see all that beautiful glittery detail of the different coloured spines on this hedgehog. Moving on to the rest of the card, and I'm going to be using that lovely Hello circle from the Friends set by Leah Griffiths. Again, I'm using the Misty and I've mounted the Hello stamp onto the door of the Misty, and I'm going to be stamping with the Ombre ink pad, which goes from light to dark peach. You can see the stripes within the ink pad, and I want the darkest colour to be at the bottom of the Hello, so I'm lining that up, and then I'm going to tap the stamp backwards and forwards slightly, doing a little shugle so that I get a nice coverage of the different colours of the ink pad. Close the door, press down firmly with your fingers, and then open up to reveal a lovely ombre variation in colour. I've used a circle die to cut out the Hello, and that's now 2 of the elements ready for the card. I'm now going to move on to the wood grain background, and I love this wood grain from Leah Griffiths. I love how it's got a sort of a modern feel to it. I'm going to white heat emboss the wood grain onto some Simon Says Stamp fog card, and to prevent the embossing powder sticking where I don't want it to, I'm firstly going to treat the card with some EK Success powder tool. And then I'm going to give the stamp a really good coating of Versamark ink, close the Misty door, and press down firmly, making sure you really give that a good press down onto the fog card. I'm using Hero Art's white embossing powder, sprinkling that on until I've got the whole of the card covered, and then tapping off any excess before bringing it to my heat tool. With the detail of the wood grain, you can't really see the magic of the embossing powder melting. However, if I hold this up to the light, you can hopefully see how beautiful that is once it's been embossed. I have a little of the Lawn Fawn Let's Polka Me paper, and I'm going to run that through my die cutter with one of the stitched squares from Simon Says Stamp. It's now time to put all this together onto a top folding white card base. I've got some more of the Lawn Fawn paper, this time in the brown stripes, and I'm going to place that onto the front of my card. Once the paper's on the front, I'm then going to trim the card down to 3 3/4 by 5 1/4. That's just slightly larger than a 4-bar card. I've also trimmed the wood grain panel down to 3.5 by 5 inches and then used some Lawn Fawn twine to tie a bow around that. I've placed some 3M foam adhesive onto the back of all the elements, and then I can start layering everything onto the card base. I use my grid mat to help me line up the first layer, and then each layer after that is much easier. Each of the elements has one layer of foam adhesive apart from the circle Hello, which has a single layer on the left hand side and then is built up more on the right hand side, and that's because the left hand side will sit on top of the hedgehog, whereas the right hand side will sit lower on the wood grain layer. A few pale pink accent pearls complete this card. However, I really enjoyed making this and I didn't want to leave it there, so I used the tag and label die and a very similar design using the same elements to create a tag to go with the card, and then before you knew it, I'd carried on and made a whole family of hedgehogs. I hope you've enjoyed seeing me bring this cutie to life. I'll leave you with some photographs and thank you for joining me today.